everyone, and welcome to Asian Viewpoints with Mary Sit. Every immigrant has a story, and our guest today tells the story of one Chinese American family in California who discovers its roots in the deep, segregated South. Larissa Lam is a filmmaker and a music artist. Her latest documentary is called Far East, Deep South, and it chronicles the story of her father-in-law, who finally decides in his later years to visit the grave of his father for the first time in Mississippi. Thank you so much for being with us, Larissa.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me, how did you decide to do a documentary on this whole journey?
Well, when we took this first trip to Mississippi, this was in 2014, and we really were just on a family vacation. I actually had no idea what was on the itinerary. I was just told we're going to Mississippi. My daughter was 1 years old at the time. My husband basically said, "Take care of our daughter, and like we're gonna just take care of our own things as our family." But as we started to go through this journey, I just thought we're going to go to the gravesite, put some flowers, return to California, never go back again. That's going to be end of the trip. And what you see in the film is exactly what starts to unfold. Is we end up not just uncovering the family history behind my husband's family, but also just this history that we never learned about in school, about this American history and the role of Chinese in the segregated South that previously not a lot of people had discussed.
So, why was your father-in-law so reluctant to visit the grave of his father? Um, was he was just hurt because he felt like his father had abandoned him from China, or what?
Yeah, that those feelings of abandonment is really the source of a lot of the pain. And I don't think my husband, my brother-in-law, even my mother-in-law, his wife, like really knew how deep those feelings and that pain went until we took this trip to Mississippi.
Okay, let's take a look at a clip right now.
Growing up, it was always kind of a mystery about my dad and his side of the family. Whenever my brother and I would ask him about my grandfather, he would just say, "Oh, it's a sad story, it's not a big deal." One day we came across this photo of a gravestone, and that's when my dad finally told us that this is where my grandfather and great-grandfather were buried. But not in China, in Mississippi.
Chinese people in Mississippi? What happened there?
I actually don't know where we're going and where we're going.
Last thing I thought I'd ever find in Mississippi was a Chinese museum.
I guess there was more than just my grandfather and my great-grandfather.
When the Chinese first came to the Delta, they were treated like we were.
Everything was very segregated. I mean, it was black, white. We were just really in the middle.
I had to attend a segregated one-room schoolhouse.
Growing up, I read about segregation, and I thought that it only affected the black community.
I just didn't really think that it happened to the Chinese too.
What?
Great-grandpa!
Oh my God. How difficult was it to direct your family? I can't imagine directing my family in anything because everybody's very strong-willed with an opinion.
Yeah, I would say that I was a little scared to interview my father-in-law because he is a little bit of a closed book. And at the time I had only been married to my husband, I think 5 years.
Mhm.
So, that wasn't a whole lot of time to be, in the family. And so I had heard all these things about how again, my father-in-law was in the military. There were certain,
You're right.
perceptions I had of him as very rigid, very strict, very stern. And what I was really surprised, and my husband and I joke, it's like he likes me more. No, I think the key whenever my husband would ask a question of my father-in-law, he would just be trying to ask about facts. And so it's like, well, what about this? What happened here? What happened there? What happened there? And when I interviewed my father-in-law, and also the key was I had my husband was out of the room. I just had one-on-one with him. So
Mhm.
it was a comfortable environment. And I really started with him talking about things that he talks about a million times. So that's my advice to people, that if you're trying to get family members to open up, maybe don't start with like the hard questions or the things that
Right.
like you are trying to get at, but ease people in, get a primer question in. So my father-in-law, again, was a little bit of that immigrant story.
Mhm.
Oh, I came on a boat with my great grandmother and, like we stopped in Hawaii and like, like
Right.
there's like those are the same stories so I started there. And then
Mhm.
eventually I got him to open up about his feelings and how he felt. And I mean, and every time he started to cry and break down, like it's just taking time. Like he's like, oh, I can't talk about this. Surprisingly, every time he said, I can't talk about this, 1 minute later, give him a little bit of breather, he'd start talking about it. And I say it was almost like his therapy session.
How difficult was it to discover some of these things? I don't want to give everything away, but
Yeah.
there were lots of what I would call almost coincidences. Like suddenly the person remembers something. Okay. Or suddenly, oh wait, there's somebody who was alive at the time the father, the
Yeah.
grandfather was alive. I mean, were these like, did you have to like dig for this stuff or it just sort of happened?
Well, the first trip that we took to Mississippi, which is covered in the first part of our film, that all happened like within a day, and we
Mhm.
met a family that was significant to the family. The second day they eventually bought the my grand it would be my grandfather-in-law's store.
Mhm.
Um, that all really came together serendipitously.
Uh-huh.
I
Right.
would like to give credit to a higher power. I believe God was his hand was all over it. I mean, I can't take
Yeah.
credit for it because, like
Uh-huh.
you said, it wasn't. I mean, I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in God incidences, and this was
Uh-huh.
just like it really blew my mind how incredible. And that's what made me stand up and pay attention. I was like, I'm just supposed to be taking care of my daughter. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, we really just we didn't have anything. We didn't even know where the gravesite was. Honestly, we just knew like. We eventually found out where the cemetery was because my brother-in-law called their city hall. And
Right.
then he was like, oh, let's just drive around and find out. I mean, that's what he says in the film. And that's literally what our plan was. We met people who remembered. We met people that ended up knowing other people or finding things in this Mississippi Delta Chinese Heritage Museum that connected to the family. And like, we had just no clue that all this information existed. And all the people that you meet in our film that we ended up meeting, they've all become good friends. We've become family. It's like we found a long lost family when we went on this journey, and it's been amazing.
Larissa, why do you think this film resonates with so many people? It won awards, it won a Telly Award, it was broadcast on PBS multiple times. It's still out on platforms, people can stream it. What is it about this film?
I think what is special about this film is the fact that everybody, I think, has a longing to know who they are, to know,
Mhm.
you know, how they belong. And I think our film covers several themes of belonging. I think there's the idea of family belonging, right? My father-in-law
Mhm.
growing up not knowing his father, wanting to feel like he was loved, right? That
Mhm.
yearning to be loved. I think that's the other thing. And then, of course, feeling like you belong as an American. I know growing up as someone who was born here, I didn't always feel like I belonged, even though I was an American citizen born here. Even today, there's not always times where I completely feel like I belong because our
Mhm.
history hasn't been told, and we're constantly being made to feel like we're perpetual foreigners. And I think
Right.
that's why I wanted to make this film was, hey, we have a richer history. Whenever I
Mhm.
learned about U.S. history, I learned about the American South, the Civil War, Reconstruction,
Mhm.
segregation, and nowhere did we learn about the impact or the fact that we were part of that history.
Right.
And
Except
so,
for the railroad, right?
except for
And
the
I think
railroads,
one of your brother or your husband says, your
yeah,
brother-in-law
yeah.
or husband said something like that. It's all we learned about.
Yeah. That's all we
Yeah.
learned about, or the gold rush. And then we kind of disappear from history
Yeah.
books
Yeah.
until you get to World War II and Japanese incarceration. And then
Right.
maybe more modern times, Vietnam War, Vietnam refugees. But aside from that, we don't really get to hear our story. And yet
Mhm.
we didn't go anywhere. We come from the gold rush, we build the railroads, and we end up spreading our all across the country.
Right.
And those stories, that's the one thing about this film too, is people also say like, oh, Mississippi's just one of those stories. Every time we do a screening in a different city, people are like, oh my gosh, my family was in Michigan, my family was in Oklahoma and Missouri, and like early in the whether it's the early 1900s, late 1800s, like there's so many more people that have lineage in this country that
Mhm.
stretches back. And I think that's why it's been resonating with people across generations, is the fact that I think everybody wants to know they belong, feel this belong, but also this sense of this is the American story that we're all part of, and just being able to root for somebody like my father-in-law, who's this everyman, and come across this beautiful journey of discovery. I think people resonate with that. I love the fact that people are now like kind of spurred to action to do something, whether it's to
Yes,
tell their own stories in their communities, share more
right.
American history, or just even share their family stories, or even discover more about those relationships that they never knew about.
After I watched the film, I started thinking, maybe I want to go to St. Louis and see where my father grew up, the neighborhood, because he was born in St. Louis. And maybe I want to see that grocery store that his father had. I started getting curious about it. And I just thought, wow, it is inspirational. It makes you want to discover. My parents have both passed now, but it makes you want to just look and find the history and sort of relive and see what they went through when they were younger.
And of course, if they want to find out more about Far East Deep South and where they can watch it, or even if they're interested in hosting a screening in their city, they can go to fareastdeepsouth.com.
Thank you so much, Larissa, for the interview.
Thank you for having me.
If you've enjoyed this video, please click the like button below and be sure to subscribe to the station so you'll never miss a show. I'm Mary Sit. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.